The moment Mendeecees Harris's name started trending again, people knew something wasn't right. At first, it was just quiet chatter, whispers buried deep in comment sections, cryptic posts, and a few suspicious reactions that didn't seem to match the public narrative. But then, things took a sharp turn. Suddenly, alleged reports began surfacing, hinting at an investigation, private records, and claims that were far more serious than anyone expected. And right in the middle of it all, Tamar Braxton's past warnings started resurfacing, almost like pieces of a puzzle finally falling into place. What made this even more intense wasn't just the accusations, it was the timing. Fans began connecting dots that had been ignored for years, questioning whether certain truths had been hidden in plain sight. Some claimed the situation involved deeply personal matters that could change everything about how the public sees this story. Others weren't so sure, urging caution and reminding everyone that not everything online is what it seems. But one thing became clear almost instantly. This wasn't just another rumor cycle. This felt bigger, heavier, and far more complicated, and if even a fraction of these claims turn out to be true, the fallout could be something no one is prepared for. The story surrounding Mendeecees Harris didn't just appear out of nowhere. It built slowly, quietly, over time, layer by layer, until what once felt like scattered whispers began forming a narrative that people could no longer ignore. Long before the recent headlines and alleged reports started circulating, there were already subtle signs that something deeper might be unfolding behind the scenes. Fans who had followed his journey for years, especially through reality television and public appearances, were used to seeing different sides of his life play out. But even then, there were moments that didn't quite add up, reactions that felt a little too controlled, and silences that seemed louder than words. Mendeecees had built a public image that balanced loyalty, resilience, and redemption. Many viewers were introduced to him through his relationship with Yandy Smith, where their bond became a central storyline that fans invested in emotionally. Together, they represented a kind of complicated but enduring partnership, one that had survived public scrutiny, legal issues, and personal struggles. To supporters, that history made him someone worth rooting for. But to critics, it also meant that any new controversy would be viewed through a lens of skepticism, with past events resurfacing almost immediately. As time went on, online conversations began shifting in tone. What once felt like casual speculation started to carry more weight. Certain blogs and social media accounts began hinting at private matters that had not been addressed publicly. At first, it was easy to dismiss. The internet has always thrived on rumors, especially when it comes to well-known figures. But this time, the persistence of the conversation made it different. People weren't just talking. They were revisiting old clips, reanalyzing past interviews, and connecting dots that had gone unnoticed before. And then there was Tamar Braxton. Her name entering the conversation added an entirely new layer of intrigue. Tamar has never been known for staying silent, especially when she feels strongly about something. Over the years, she has made comments, sometimes subtle, sometimes direct, that fans now believe may have hinted at deeper issues. At the time, those moments were often brushed off as emotional reactions or taken out of context. But as new claims began to surface, people started looking back with a different perspective, questioning whether there had been more truth behind her words than anyone realized. The situation reportedly took a more serious turn when alleged information began circulating about a possible investigation. It wasn't confirmed, and sources remained unclear, but the mere suggestion was enough to ignite widespread attention. The idea that something official might be happening behind the scenes raised the stakes dramatically. Suddenly, this wasn't just about gossip or speculation. It became a question of credibility, accountability, and what might be revealed if the rumors held any weight. What made everything even more complicated was the nature of the claims themselves. According to various online discussions, the situation involved deeply personal matters, topics that are often sensitive, misunderstood, and easily misrepresented. Words like results and proof began appearing in posts, creating an atmosphere of urgency and tension. But without verified information, the line between fact and assumption became increasingly blurred. Some people believed the claims immediately, treating them as confirmation of long-held suspicions. Others pushed back, reminding everyone that serious allegations require serious evidence, not just speculation. Meanwhile, the public reaction continued to grow. Videos discussing the situation began gaining traction, with creators offering their own interpretations and theories. Each new upload added another perspective, another angle, another possibility. Comment sections turned into debates, with supporters and skeptics going back and forth, each side convinced they were seeing the truth more clearly than the other. The story was no longer contained. It had spread across platforms, reaching audiences who may not have followed Mendeecees closely before. Through all of this, one of the most striking aspects was the emotional intensity surrounding the narrative. This wasn't just about curiosity. It was about perception, how people see public figures, how quickly opinions can shift, and how fragile reputations can become when faced with uncertainty. For someone like Mendeecees, whose life has already been shaped by public highs and lows, the emergence of new allegations carried significant weight. Every new claim, whether proven or not, had the potential to influence how he was viewed moving forward. At the same time, there was an underlying question that kept surfacing: why now? Timing plays a crucial role in stories like this, and many people couldn't help but wonder what might have triggered this sudden wave of attention. Was it the result of new information coming to light? A deliberate attempt to bring something forward? Or simply the natural evolution of rumors that had been building for years? Without clear answers, speculation filled the gaps, creating a narrative that felt both compelling and uncertain. Yandy's position in all of this also became a point of discussion. As someone closely connected to Mendeecees, her perspective, whether shared publicly or kept private, carried importance. Fans began watching her closely, analyzing her posts, her expressions, even her silence. In situations like this, absence of comment can sometimes speak louder than words, leading to even more questions about what might be happening behind closed doors. And then there was the broader impact on the audience. Stories like this don't just exist in isolation, they reflect larger conversations about trust, relationships, and the way information is shared in the digital age. The rapid spread of claims, combined with the emotional reactions they provoke, highlights how quickly narratives can form and evolve. It also raises important questions about responsibility, both for those sharing information and for those consuming it. As the situation continued to develop, one thing became clear: this was no longer a simple story with a clear beginning and end. It had turned into a complex, unfolding narrative, shaped by multiple voices, perspectives, and interpretations. Every new detail, whether confirmed or alleged, added another layer, making it harder to separate what was known from what was assumed. And yet, despite all the noise, all the speculation, and all the uncertainty, people remained deeply invested. Because at its core, this wasn't just about rumors or headlines. It was about real people, real lives, and the consequences that come with being in the public eye. Whether the claims would ultimately be proven, disproven, or remain unresolved was still unknown. But one thing was certain: the story was far from over, and whatever came next had the potential to change everything. As the conversation around Mendeecees Harris continued to intensify, the situation began shifting from quiet speculation into something far more volatile. What once lived in the corners of the internet had now moved front and center, pulling in larger audiences, bigger platforms, and louder voices. The narrative was no longer controlled by a few scattered sources. It had taken on a life of its own, evolving in real time as new claims, reactions, and interpretations flooded social media. The turning point seemed to come when alleged details about results began circulating more aggressively. No official documents were publicly verified, yet that didn't stop the conversation from exploding. Screenshots, some clear, some questionable, were shared across platforms, each one presented as potential proof. People dissected every image, every caption, every supposed leak, trying to determine what was real and what might have been manipulated. The uncertainty only fueled the fire. Because in situations like this, ambiguity doesn't slow things down, it accelerates them. At the same time, Tamar Braxton's name kept resurfacing in ways that felt impossible to ignore. Old interviews, past live streams, and even brief comments she had made years ago were suddenly being revisited with fresh eyes. Some fans claimed that she had been trying to hint at something long before any of this became public. Others argued that her words were being taken out of context, shaped to fit a narrative that people were eager to believe. Still, the timing of it all made it difficult for many to dismiss the connection entirely. Then came another layer that added even more tension to the story, allegations that certain individuals may have known more than they initially let on. According to online discussions, there were whispers suggesting that parts of this narrative had been circulating privately for some time. If true, that would mean this wasn't a sudden revelation, but rather something that had been quietly building behind the scenes. The idea that information might have been selectively shared, or even withheld, raised serious questions about trust and intention. For fans who had followed Mendeecees for years, this created a complicated emotional response. On one hand, there was loyalty, built through years of watching his journey, supporting his relationship with Yandy Smith, and believing in the image he had presented. On the other hand, there was growing doubt, fueled by the constant stream of claims that refused to go away. It became increasingly difficult to hold onto one perspective without acknowledging the other. Yandy's presence, or in some cases, her silence, only deepened the intrigue. Every post she shared was scrutinized. Every absence was noted. People began reading between the lines, searching for clues in moments that might not have meant anything at all. That's the nature of public narratives like this. When answers aren't given directly, audiences create their own interpretations, filling in the blanks with assumptions that can quickly become accepted as truth. Meanwhile, content creators played a significant role in amplifying the story. Videos analyzing the situation began trending, each one offering a slightly different take. Some leaned toward believing the allegations, presenting them as credible based on patterns and past behavior. Others took a more cautious approach, emphasizing the lack of confirmed evidence and warning against jumping to conclusions. But regardless of the angle, the effect was the same: the story stayed alive, constantly evolving, constantly pulling in more attention. The emotional stakes continued to rise as the conversation became more personal. This wasn't just about public perception anymore. It was about how these claims, whether true or not, could impact real relationships. For Mendeecees, the pressure was undeniable. Being at the center of such a narrative means every move is watched, every word is analyzed, and every silence is questioned. Even without confirmed details, the weight of public opinion alone can be overwhelming. And then there was the question of motive. Why would these allegations surface now? Some speculated that there could be underlying conflicts, unresolved tensions, or even external influences pushing the story into the spotlight. Others believed it was simply the result of information reaching a tipping point, where enough pieces had come together that the story could no longer remain hidden. Without clear answers, these theories continued to circulate, each one adding another layer of complexity. As the days went on, the conversation showed no signs of slowing down. If anything, it became more intense. People who had initially stayed quiet began sharing their thoughts. New voices entered the discussion, bringing fresh perspectives, and, in some cases, new claims. The narrative expanded, branching into multiple directions, each one feeding back into the central story. Through it all, one thing remained consistent: the sense that something significant was unfolding, even if the full truth wasn't yet visible. The combination of alleged evidence, past statements, and current reactions created a narrative that felt too detailed to ignore, yet too uncertain to fully accept. It was this tension that kept people engaged, constantly refreshing their feeds, waiting for the next update, the next reveal, the next piece of the puzzle. At the center of it all, Tamar's role continued to spark debate. Was she someone who had tried to speak out earlier, only to be dismissed? Or was her name being used now to give more weight to claims that were still unproven? The answer wasn't clear, but the question itself became part of the story, adding another dimension to an already complex situation. As the narrative reached this point, it was clear that things had gone far beyond simple rumors. The escalation had transformed it into something much larger, a public saga filled with uncertainty, emotion, and unanswered questions. The lines between fact and speculation remained blurred, but the impact was already being felt. And just when it seemed like the story couldn't get any more intense, new whispers began to emerge, hinting that there might be even more beneath the surface. Not just about the alleged results, but about past decisions, hidden conversations, and connections that had yet to be fully explored. If those whispers held any truth, then everything seen so far might only be the beginning. Because in stories like this, the most shocking moments rarely come first. They come later, after the tension has built, after the audience is fully invested, and after the narrative has reached a point where turning back is no longer possible. And right now, it feels like that moment is getting closer. By the time the situation reached its most intense point, the narrative surrounding Mendeecees Harris had already transformed into something far bigger than anyone initially expected. What began as whispers and alleged leaks had now evolved into a full-scale public storm, one that touched not only his reputation, but also the people closest to him. And as with any story that grows this quickly, the fallout didn't come all at once. It unfolded in waves, each one hitting harder than the last. The first wave was perception. Public opinion, once divided, began shifting more dramatically. Some supporters held firmly to the belief that the claims were exaggerated, or even entirely false, pointing to the lack of verified confirmation. They argued that in the age of viral misinformation, it's dangerously easy for narratives to spiral without evidence. Others, however, felt that the consistency of the allegations, combined with resurfaced moments from the past, made it difficult to dismiss everything outright. The divide wasn't just about belief, it was about trust, and once that starts to crack, it rarely returns to its original form. For Yandy Smith, the pressure seemed almost unavoidable. Being closely tied to Mendeecees meant that any shift in public opinion toward him naturally extended to her as well. Fans began questioning not just what she knew, but when she knew it. Her silence, whether intentional or simply a personal choice, became a focal point of discussion. In situations like this, people often expect statements, clarity, or even denial. When those don't come, speculation tends to fill the space. Every post she made was analyzed, every absence noted, turning her presence into part of the unfolding narrative whether she wanted it to be or not. At the same time, Tamar Braxton remained a lingering presence in the background of the story. Her past comments continued to circulate, gaining more attention with each passing day. What once may have seemed like isolated remarks were now being framed as potential warnings, moments that, according to some fans, deserved to be taken more seriously from the beginning. Others pushed back against that idea, arguing that hindsight has a way of reshaping interpretation. Still, Her name being repeatedly tied to the situation added another layer of intrigue that refused to fade. As the public conversation intensified, the emotional impact behind the scenes became harder to ignore. While much of the story played out online, its consequences were undeniably real. Relationships, both personal and professional, faced strain under the weight of constant scrutiny. Trust, already a fragile concept in high-profile lives, was now being tested in ways that couldn't easily be repaired. Even if the allegations were never fully confirmed, the mere existence of such widespread speculation carried lasting effects. Another significant shift came in how the story began affecting Mendeecees' public image. For years, his narrative had included elements of growth, resilience, and rebuilding. Many people had followed his journey with a sense of investment, watching as he navigated challenges and worked to redefine himself. But controversies, especially ones tied to deeply personal claims, have a way of overshadowing even the strongest redemption arcs. Suddenly, the focus wasn't on where he had come from or how far he had come. It was on what might be true now. Media coverage only amplified that shift. While traditional outlets remained cautious, often using careful language like allegedly and unconfirmed, digital platforms moved much faster. Headlines leaned into the drama, emphasizing the most shocking elements of the story to capture attention. This created a feedback loop where public reaction influenced coverage, and coverage, in turn, influenced public reaction. The story fed itself, growing larger with every cycle. Meanwhile, new whispers continued to emerge, suggesting that what had already surfaced might only be part of a much bigger picture. Some sources claimed there were additional details, conversations, documents, or accounts, that had yet to be made public. Whether those claims held any truth remained uncertain, but their presence alone kept the tension alive. Because once a story reaches this level of intensity, it doesn't simply fade away. It lingers, waiting for the next development to push it forward again. For fans, this created a sense of ongoing anticipation. Every day brought the possibility of new information, a new perspective, or a turning point that could change everything. Some people began stepping back, choosing to wait for verified facts before forming an opinion. Others leaned further into the speculation, convinced that the patterns they were seeing pointed to a deeper truth. The audience itself became part of the narrative, shaping its direction through engagement, discussion, and interpretation. Through it all, one of the most complicated aspects remained the question of truth versus perception. In situations driven by alleged information and public reaction, those two things don't always align. What people believe can sometimes carry just as much weight as what can be proven, especially in the court of public opinion. And once a perception takes hold, it can be incredibly difficult to change, even in the face of new evidence. As the dust attempted to settle, the reality became clear. Nothing about this situation had reached a true conclusion. There were still too many unanswered questions, too many perspectives, and too many emotions involved for the story to feel complete. Instead, it lingered in a kind of suspended state, where resolution felt both necessary and just out of reach. And then came the final twist that kept everyone on edge. Insiders began hinting that the narrative might not end with these allegations alone. There were suggestions of deeper connections, past decisions, and hidden dynamics that could potentially reshape everything once again. It wasn't presented as confirmation, but as possibility, a reminder that in stories like this, what's visible is often only part of what exists. That lingering uncertainty is what makes this situation so gripping. It's not just about what has been said or what might be true. It's about what hasn't been revealed yet. The spaces between the known details, the unanswered questions, the moments that don't quite fit together, they create a tension that refuses to resolve. For Mendeecees, Yandy, and everyone connected to them, the road ahead remains unclear. There may be statements, clarifications, or even silence. Each choice will shape how the story continues to unfold. But one thing is certain, this moment has already left a mark. Whether temporary or lasting, its impact cannot be undone. And for the audience watching from the outside, the question remains the same. Is this the full story, or just another chapter in something much larger? Because if there's one thing this situation has made clear, it's that sometimes the biggest revelations don't come all at once. They come in pieces, slowly, until the full picture finally comes into view, if it ever does at all. Now I want to hear from you, because this story is far from simple, and honestly, it raises more questions than answers. After everything that's been said, all the alleged details, and the reactions we've seen unfold, where do you stand on this situation? Do you think the claims surrounding Mendeecees Harris hold any real weight? Or do you believe this is another case of the internet running too far ahead without solid proof? And what about Tamar Braxton? Looking back at everything she's said in the past, do you feel like she was trying to warn people? Or are her words being reinterpreted now to fit a narrative that's still unclear? There's a lot to unpack here, and every perspective adds something new to the conversation. Then there's Yandy Smith. Her silence, her presence, and everything in between, what do you think it really means? Is it protection, strategy, or something else entirely? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this is one of those stories where your opinion truly matters. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next. Because if these rumors turn into something bigger, trust me, you're going to want to be here when it happens.